Thousands of Canadians have lost their jobs, their education, and their well-being as a result of vaccine mandates and vaccine passports. They are the one group in society we are now allowed to denigrate, demonize, and scapegoat. And the legacy media refuses to report on the devastating effects of these mandatory vaccines. But we at True North, we're willing to do that. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. Hi everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. You know, if you watch the legacy media, if you tune into the CBC, you would see a lot of scapegoating of the unvaccinated. You would see very visceral reactions. There was an infamous now Toronto Star front page headline that said, "Let them die." I can't imagine any other group in society being treated the way that our society has been treating the unvaccinated, treating them as if they're barely human, that they don't have the same rights and freedoms as the rest of us. And according to our law now, they don't. They don't have the same rights and the same freedoms as other Canadians, even though they are Canadians. One of the most shocking things of the 2021 federal election this year was the way that Trudeau was openly bashing these Canadians, like as if they weren't actually Canadian citizens, as if they didn't deserve the same dignity, respect, and rights as other Canadians. It was disturbing to see. And again, no other group would be treated this way, no other group. And so to talk about this today, I wanted to bring back Samuel Say. We had him on the show yesterday, and this is an area that he's really good at as well. So I invited him to come on again today. So if you don't know Samuel, you should really check him out. He runs the website slowtowrite.com. He's a scholar and a writer based in Brampton, Ontario, and he has a lot of areas of expertise. Usually he's out there investigating and critiquing critical race theory and talking about biblical theory. But one of the things that he did that was really, really useful and interesting was that he created a long form piece of writing about people and their individual stories of how they've been affected, how their freedom has been upended because of the vaccine mandates and their own personal unwillingness to get vaccinated. Really heartbreaking story. So first of all, Samuel, thank you so much for joining the Candice Malcolm Show again today.
Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
Okay, so why don't you tell us first of all, how did this idea come to fruition? So really, you put out an open call and you heard back from a lot of Canadians. So how did this idea come up? And tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, it started because I've been following just the lockdowns and especially the vaccine issue, and I was very concerned already that a number of Black people that I know, a lot of my family and friends would be heavily impacted by the vaccine mandates. And I was just thinking about how last year our federal and provincial governments talked about how they cared about Black Lives Matter and everything else, and yet they're about to push a mandate that would disproportionately harm Black people. And I was really bothered by that hypocrisy. And then I reached out to a good friend of mine now, Jamil Giovanni, who is an author and a radio host, and he is the Ontario government advocate for community opportunities. So I said, look, hey, this is in your area. Doug Ford hired you for this. I would love to have maybe do something with you on this. And he's a great guy. He said, you know what, let's think of something. And then he mentioned, Sam, maybe we should have a place on your website to have people share their stories on how the vaccine mandates are harming them, and then we will share it with the Ontario government and then see how they respond to that. And I can't go in detail actually, but we know that it did have some impact. Some of these stories have had an impact in their mandates. As much as we don't like the mandates, we know it could have been much worse if not for these stories that we were able to collect. So then I ended up creating a space on my blog, Slow to Write, for people to share their stories, and we've received over 100 entries so far from people across mostly Ontario, but across all of Canada, sharing how these mandates are harming their lives.
It's really interesting. It's rarely reported that vaccine hesitancy is highest in Black and Indigenous communities. And, we had you on the show yesterday and we talked all about critical race theory. And we know that so many of these initiatives are sort of, in theory at least, designed to help Black and Indigenous people, realize a greater level of opportunity in our society. And yet, at the exact same time as they're advocating, some people on the left are advocating for these, woke ideological ideas like critical race theory or the ideas that come from critical race theory. At the same time, those are some of the loudest voices advocating for really heavy-handed measures against unvaccinated. Is there a disconnect here? Like, do the people advocating not realize who the unvaccinated people in large part are? Or I know Doug Ford, at first he resisted the idea of a vaccine mandate. He said he didn't want to create a split society. And yet, that's sort of what we have at this point. I wonder if you could just address that.
Yeah, well, last year I didn't believe them, and I don't believe them this year as well. That they don't care about Black Lives Matter. They don't care about Black people, anything like that. I'm not saying they're racist. I'm just saying that it's all just politics. They'll say anything they need to say to win elections. So last year, when Trudeau went to the Black Lives Matter rally and bent his knee, admitting that Canada is systemically racist. Well, that would mean then that he is saying that he is the leader of a racist system. That would be him saying that he is a racist. He doesn't really believe that. Of course he doesn't. He's just saying that because he thinks that's what's best for him to do politically. In the same way.
Well, he also said that he believed that Canada was committing genocide. Not that we did commit genocide, not that Canada committed genocide in the past, but that Canada is currently committing genocide. So him admitting that would be admitting that he is a genocidal prime minister, which is pretty wild that he admitted that and that he got away with it. That the media just gave him a pass on that. But anyway, I'll let you continue because I interrupted.
It's really bizarre. We live in a society where the way to get to be seen as a virtuous person is to admit that you're a horrible person, even though you don't really mean it. That's just our society right now. So in the same way, the reason why they're doing what they're doing, even though they know it's harming mostly Black people, or not mostly, but it's a portion number of Black people or just people, is because they know it's best for them. At least they think it's best for them politically to be doing this anyway.
So can you tell us some of the? I mean, I read through some of the stories. I have to admit, I didn't read them all because I found them pretty just heartbreaking, frankly, to read. But can you share some of the gist of some of them, or some of the ones that you found particularly difficult to read?
Absolutely. Some of the most there are a lot. I've read every single one of them, and it's been difficult. It's difficult to read them because people are sharing their difficult stories. So there are many immigrants who've mentioned how they left their countries, they left a communist or oppressive regime to come to Canada for freedom, and then now they're thinking, what do they come here for? Because the same things that were happening, well, the same things they saw in their original nations are happening here, where they're not being treated as second-class citizens. I heard from nurses who were like at the beginning of this pandemic, they were being referred to as heroes, but now they're being told, at the time anyway, that if you don't get vaccinated, not only are you not a hero, you're not worthy of working for us. I've also heard from there was one person in particular that was especially heartbreaking for me. This person has a history of, I think she's just 18 or 19 years old. She has a history of autoimmune disease in her family, and she herself has this autoimmune disease. And she is supposed to be in her I think in her second or last year of university. She would be the first person in her family to get a degree. Her parents are both, ill, and they're not able to provide past the next few years. So they've been relying on her to finish her degree so that she can provide for the family. And now, because she can't get the vaccine because of her autoimmune disease, she's not able to continue her studies right now. And she was telling me she's depressed, and many people have been saying that their mental health have suffered greatly, that she's depressed, she's crying every day, she has no hope. And it's deeply concerning. We know that mental health and suicide has increased dramatically over the last couple of years over this, and I'm deeply worried reading some of the stories about younger people and older people suffering in light of all this. I also heard people who didn't want to take the vaccine because of their concerns about how it would affect them, but because they were forced to into doing so because of their jobs or school, they ended up having really bad adverse reactions from it. And so the stories are very difficult to read.
Well, it's really excellent journalism that you're doing over there, and it's sort of surprising that the legacy media doesn't do this kind of thing, because we don't see any sympathy whatsoever. In fact, we see the opposite. We see sort of drumming up negativity and demonization. Other people, we saw it a lot during election. We continue to see it, and it's just sort of par for the course for the legacy media. what do you think it is about the media, Samuel, that make them so one-sided on this issue? So relentless in their sort of badgering that Canadians must all do this thing, and it just full disclosure, and viewers know this. I'm vaccinated. I decided to do it mostly because I just wanted to get back to regular life, and even after doing it, it's like we're never going to get back to regular life. We did this because we were told that if we did it, you wouldn't have to wear a mask anymore. You could travel more easily. That's not true, obviously. And now there's a new variant, and they're saying, well, your old vaccine doesn't work anymore with this new variant, so you got to go out and get more vaccines. It's like this is never ending, right? But specifically back to the media, like can you help me? Like what do you think it is that makes the media in Canada so one-sided on this issue?
Yeah, there are a number of reasons why. So full disclosure as well too. I'm actually unvaccinated. I actually have COVID right now. You already knew that, but I have COVID. I've been taking something other than I am not against the vaccine. I just don't think I need it, and I'm on day 7 of having COVID symptoms, and besides congesting, I'm okay. I've been taking an alternative. I've been taking vitamins and other things to help myself, to overcome COVID. But I say all that because the media really has become very, very friendly with big government and big pharma, and they don't want to go against the narrative, seemingly. So I think that's one. The other thing is, I think they don't want, because they're very much pro-vaccine, which again, I'm okay with someone being pro-vaccine. That's no problem. The problem is, I think, since they become so tied to the narrative, they're not willing to show the other side. Because if they show the other side, then some people might realize that, wait a minute, the vaccine is not the only way to survive against COVID. And I think that's one of the problems. The other thing I think too is, if you show the other side, if they were to highlight some of the stories that I'm highlighting, they would understand why the vaccine may not be the best option for everybody, because then you will see some of the real stories of people having really bad adverse reactions from this, and they don't want to do that, so they rather ignore people like myself and the others.
Well, I had an interview the other day, Samuel, and the subject said that a lot of this stuff they're proving the conspiracy theorists right, and I feel like that's kind of the case here. It's like they hide stories. So if you get sick from COVID, that's news, right? If you die from COVID, that's front page news. If you get sick from the vaccine, or if you die from the vaccine, they bury that. They don't want anyone knowing, and it's like the more that you bury that, the more people start to wonder, like, hey, why aren't we hearing about this? What's with the discrepancy? People start to sort of look into it and doubt it, and I feel like they create conspiracy theorists, but then also just the way that the goalposts are constantly moving, and some of the things that people were predicting a year ago, oh, we're still going to be locked down, oh, there's going to be forced vaccines and mandates, people said, oh, that's a conspiracy, and now we're living it, right? It's like this is like the slippery slope kind of argument. But I mean, just, and now the next thing is little kids who don't really have it, don't really die from COVID. Don't really, the hospitalization numbers are so minuscule. The morbidity, case fatality rate is basically nothing. And yet little kids are getting vaccinated. I read now that they're talking about getting babies vaccinated. It's against COVID, something that doesn't really pose a mortal threat to them. It's sort of bizarre. And I'm sure through your reporting, you realize that the people who are choosing not to get vaccinated, it's not just because they're crazy, it's because they have a health reason, or they have a legitimate reason that's sort of being ignored. So what is the sort of big takeaway from your project? You said that you did have a positive sort of interaction with the Ontario government. That's good to hear. But what was the sort of the big takeaway for you from the project?
Yeah, the big takeaway, honestly, is more discussed with the media. To be honest with you, one of the things that broke my heart more was that people were telling me, Sam, thank you for doing this. Thank you. We don't want anybody out there who's amplifying our voice. And I know there's True North. I know you guys are doing a great job with all this stuff, but legacy media is completely ignoring all of this. So I was just sad that we don't have more people in our nation that will give them voice. That's what some of them wrote essays essentially, because they were finally glad that they could talk about this, and not just so that I could share it on my blog so that people could see it, but that they knew that some people in the government would be funnily able to hear them. So that's the first thing that comes to mind for me.
That's great. No, that's really important work. And also, to me, because like I said, I'm vaccinated, but I don't have the ideology that everyone must. Like I don't, that we were told to get vaccinated to protect yourself, right? So then, in theory, it shouldn't matter who around me is vaccinated or not because I'm protected. Well, it turned out that wasn't really true because they were saying, well, you can still get COVID even though you're vaccinated. I think we have to have more empathy and more understanding that there are different paths for different people. We don't all have the same health. We don't have all the same bodies. We don't have all the same backgrounds and underlying issues and age, and there's so many variations among us that why should there be a one size fits all policy, especially coming down heavy handed from the government. Some of the negative effects that I read about and that I saw on your blog have to do with the healthcare system. So even though Ontario doesn't have a vaccine mandate implemented for healthcare workers, many hospitals do. So as a result, we've seen delayed surgeries, we've seen patients turned away, we've seen healthcare workers fired, we've seen shortages of healthcare workers, we've seen emergency rooms shut down. Our healthcare system is already fragile. It's already, I think, fundamentally flawed because of the sort of single payer, state run centralization and not enough money going into the system. What do you think of our healthcare system? Can it recover from the effects of the vaccine mandate? And how long do you think these mandates will be in place?
Oh man, so I'm in the Peel region where every time I hear talk about our hospitals being overcrowded. I'm like, well, it's been overcrowded well before COVID. What are we talking about? And this is very
Right.
far. This has been a major issue in the Peel region for some time. Nevertheless, honestly, I said the very first, within the first 2 weeks of the original, the 15 days to sort of spread, I mentioned that this is not going away anytime. Once we become so afraid that we give the government power to protect us from a virus, we're in deep trouble. I knew that then, and 2 years afterwards, we're still here. I have still heard from credible people that there still might be lockdowns coming, or at least more severe restrictions coming. And it seems like with the new variant, it's become more and more legitimate over time. Unfortunately, I don't see this ending till well into maybe next year or early 2023. So I'm forgetting which these years, but I hope I'm wrong.
It's all a blur, right? It's all a blur. The last 2 years. Well, exactly. And saying that kind of stuff 2 years ago would have gotten you called a conspiracy theorist, and yet here we are 2 years in, and you still have to wear a mask just to go inside to get a coffee or to go on the subway or whatever. It's like it does. You're right. The government got a little taste of the power, and they're not going to easily let it go. Okay. Final question for you, Samuel. What do you think Canadians can do? I mean, there's a lot of people who refuse to get vaccinated. That's their prerogative, all the power to them. Other Canadians that just want to get through the pandemic, they'll do anything just to get through it. To your point that we're giving the government so much power, it's going to be hard to take it back or for them to relinquish it. What do you think the best thing for Canadians to do in the face of all this?
Uh, One of the most encouraging things I saw from the vaccine passport stories on my blog is there were a handful of vaccinated people who were saying, look, they're vaccinated, they're pro the vaccine, but they hate these vaccine passport systems. So they refuse to live as first class citizens in our country. And that blessed me so much. And I think one of the things people can do is, since most Canadians are vaccinated, reject these vaccine mandates. Do not live as a first class citizen, because if you live as a first class citizen, that means then that you are allowing second class citizens in your nation, and don't do that. If vaccinated people reject this system, then the system will collapse. They can't do anything. So that's what I recommend for people to do.
That's great. And I just heard a story today about someone who did just that she was going to the doctors, refused, even though she was vaccinated, refused to show her card and said, no, I don't have to show it. I refuse. They said, no, you can't come in. She goes, no, I know my rights. I can come in, and just completely refused, and part of the reason why was because this person was an immigrant from Eastern Europe and had seen this movie before and didn't want to participate in a society that demanded to see your papers just to go about your daily life. So Samuel, I think that's a great, very wise, good words of advice there. And thank you so much for joining the show, sharing your insight, and also just for undertaking this incredibly important work. It's sort of telling that journalism like this isn't happening on the CBC. It's not happening in the mainstream. It takes independent people like yourself to do it. And I definitely applaud you for taking this on.
Well, honestly, I'm just trying to follow, your footsteps. I really appreciate what True North does. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, that's very kind. All right. Thank you so much, Samuel, for joining. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show.